learning the mistakes. If he's taking photographs, and then if he's ever considered sending the new home buyer, several months later, a note saying, oh, and by the way, these are the things that you're probably going to have to watch out for.
Oh, man.
And here's my card when you have a moment.
Welcome to the Fine Home Building Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. I'm Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Kylie Jacques, Green Building Advisor Senior Editor.
Hello.
Mike Girton, Fine Home Building Editorial Advisor.
Hi.
And Jeff Rose, our producer.
Hello.
You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. Well, it's a pleasure to see you all this morning. Thanks for being here.
Likewise.
So we were saying ahead of the show that the very best part of the Fine Home Building Podcast is our very engaged group of listeners. So thank you all for writing in and sending us your thoughts and questions, because it really does make the show good.
And what else makes it good is a lot of the research that I've been doing to as I'm reading a question to find answers or supplemental information is the readers on GBA and the readers on Fine Home Building on their forums and their question and answer. There's just a wealth of information that both on the question side and on the answer side. So we tap into every resource we can.
Those people who answer questions on GBA are remarkable too, and they put the same thought and care into their responses that we get to the podcast. So
it's often been said that the Q&A forum is the heart of GBA, and it's free. You don't have to be a member to chime in there and read and engage. So,
boy, if you want to learn building science, that's where to do it, and it's put on by some pretty smart folks. Speaking of which, how are you doing, Kylie?
That's sweet. Wow, I have big news. The sale of my house is under contract. So if everything goes according to plan, I did very well in the sale. So I'm thrilled. I was not expecting that because anybody
I was not expecting it either.
Because time will know that it had a major fault, which was the fact that it needs a new well, and it's so I was hoping to break even, quite frankly, and the market is just so nutty right now that I got a cash offer, $76,000 over the asking price. I'm not supposed to say that.
No, don't jinx it.
I know. But I mean, love it seemingly. Like you said, don't jinx it. So I don't want to talk too much about it, but it's
a cute place, and anyone would see
the
value if they visited it.
Yes, it is an adorable little house.
You did do a lot of work to it over the years, though.
Actually, Mike, that's the thing of it. I did a lot of exterior work. I did a lot of drainage work. I did a lot of road work. I did a lot of landscape work, and I spent a lot of time trying to divert water away from the foundation and getting huge threatening limbs away from the roof. That's where my money got spent. I put in a few new appliances. But the truth of the matter is, I didn't spend a ton on the house itself, the structure itself, only because I couldn't get anybody to come work on it for me. Honest to God, that was the bottom line. And if you don't have the skills and you don't know anyway, that's why I'm so, quite frankly, flabbergasted that I did well. So it's the market. It really is. And like you said, Patrick, it's for the right person. It's a sweet little house.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would still argue in Southbury, that's still the very entry level of homes, right? It is probably as little as you could spend.
Absolutely.
Especially on a single family.
Right.
Yeah.
Which, in small houses, we've talked about this before, they're difficult to find.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
How's your place, Mike? Is it feeling like home there?
Well, and almost to the point of feeling like home where I don't want to go back to New England.
Are you sort of camping out there for now, working on the place?
I'm working, most of the time. I haven't been on the podcast in a couple of weeks, and I've been accomplishing a fair amount. I'm now in my new, almost done office room, which was an old walk-in closet, where I took a couple of door slabs yesterday afternoon and turned them into a giant L-shaped desk. And this is why I'm thinking, boy, when I go home, I'm actually going to be downgrading to a little tiny desk. And then I was out a couple days ago watching the sunset while running a 85-pound breaker hammer to chisel through the caliche soil so I could get some metal landscaping edge in. Like you say, Kylie, with your house, where you did a lot of work on the outside, which, maybe you don't see the value that you add to the house because you're not working on the structure, but it does add to the appeal that when somebody comes and looks at it, it looks so much nicer, and they think, oh, this is beautiful. I could live here. This is quaint or whatever. And we put a lot of landscaping in the front of our house, so I need to put a metal edge to break the crushed rock to the driveway. And you can't just put that metal edge in without a jackhammer around here.
I bet.
And then, wire
Can you
fencing.
describe that? So, like, you have to make a trench and then backfill it, or do you make like a little slit? How's that work?
Well, I took a wide blade on the breaker hammer, and for people who aren't familiar with breaker hammers, they're like a electric jackhammer essentially, and you chisel a slot into this. It's not really rock. It's like
Clay,
a calcium
right?
carbonate,
Hard clay. Yeah.
cemented with the clay and the silt and the gravel that are around here. And then when the water hits it, it softens up. But when it's dry, it's hard as rock. So
It's like rammed earth.
yes,
rammed earth
exactly. That's a
material.
good example. Yep.
Yeah.
So, and then putting up a wire fence to keep the javelina now from eating all the plants. And
What are
just
javelina?
lots of-
What's a javelina?
Yeah. I'm glad I'm not the only one that doesn't know.
So you've seen wild boars, wild pigs. Well, they're swine. They're not. This is a peccary. So they look similar to a wild pig, a little chunkier. They're kind of blind. Unless you get between the mother and the young, then you're not going to get attacked or anything. But they just wander around and eat thorny things like prickly pear. So.
Jeff, you are familiar with javelinas?
I have not. I've never heard of them before.
They sound like the kind of animal you should put to work. Like if you have a thorny hillside and you want it cleared, get a javelina.
It's kind
Jeff,
of
you've been
like, you think of armadillos, they're kind of like, they're in the South and Southwest, and you don't think too much about them if you're up north. But when you see them for the first time, you're like, oh my gosh, there's a
Shocking.
creature like that. That's the way javelinas are for
They're
northerners.
just wildly running around.
Well, we should ask our listeners to tell us about more animals we're unfamiliar with, because I think that's kind of fun, right? Jeff, have you been working on your place?
Not really. No, I was traveling again last weekend, so I haven't really had much of a chance to do anything.
Did you go anyplace interesting?
Well, I was in Seattle at the Northwest Flower and Garden Show or whatever it is.
I used to partake in that.
Yeah.
And we would win
Is that
prizes.
the first time you've been there, Jeff?
It's a nice place.
Yes. Yeah, not the first time to Seattle, but the first time to the Flower and Garden Show. Yeah.
What's your thoughts on Seattle?
Well, last time I was there was probably 40 years ago. So it's changed a lot.
I bet.
Yeah. That's a very reputable show for any people out there who are interested in gardening as well as fine home building.
Carol was out there on behalf of Fine Gardening at the show with Jeff.
Of course. Right. Of
recording.
course. That's why he was there. Yeah.
Kylie, the GBA is sponsoring a podcast, the Retrofit podcast. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, I think we're 3 episodes in running so far. Others have been recorded and just need to be released. But Ryan Shanahan is the host of the show, and he's doing an excellent job. This is his first time doing something like that, but he's so passionate about the topics, and he's very forward thinking. He's with Bird's Mouth Design in Design Build in Portsmouth, Oregon. Portland, Oregon, and. Yeah, we have this really great lineup of guests in mind and topics at hand, and retrofitting current housing stock is a subject that comes up as not being covered enough. Because, people always say it's easier to build right than it is to fix things. So that's kind of where the genesis of the idea was, just that it's a very popular, broad spectrum topic under which all kinds of things can get discussed. So yeah, I mean, if I'm not sure what else you'd like to. So far, we've had on Josh Salinger, who is the founder of Bird's Mouth. Allison Bales, always an excellent speaker, full of information and charming and fun to listen to. And who's the third?
Dan Colbert.
Oh, thank you, Dan Colbert. That's right. Based in Maine, and he's a hoot too. He's got character
Yes,
and great
he is.
information to share. So, expect it to be, more narrowly focused on building science related topics.
And how often is it, Kylie?
Every other week. It releases on Fridays. So, yeah.
I've listened to a couple, and it's really good. So I would highly recommend it to folks. And I would also highly recommend members to the Fine Home Building website and our All Access members should check out the new Energy Retrofit Project Guide, which is our newest one. And it highlights a number of the steps needed to take homes to the next level with regard to performance. So check that out if you can, and take advantage of your all access membership, because there are tons of good benefits to be had with being a member of Fine Home Building. And
that topic is so, at the fore right now, energy retrofits, right?
Oh, yeah.
And
so,
another thing
I'll
available.
Keep it brief. Go ahead, Mike.
No, I was going to say, as another benefit of being a member, you get to hear the after show. And I was wondering, what are we going to talk about? Because I didn't check the email this morning.
We're going to talk about the future of housing in the U.S. And like we always do, we're going to solve a bunch of problems for the country. Solve the housing crisis, right, Kylie? But so what sparked this idea was, I saw a piece in the New York Times about redeveloping suburban malls. They've fallen on hard times in recent decades, and what to do with this real estate that's oftentimes in very desirable places. So some solutions are adding rental units to malls and other non-traditional mall store services to these places. So we'll talk more about that. I found it pretty interesting.
The idea of it.
I'm hosting Ian to my homestead next week, so I'm a little nervous to have a good carpenter looking around the place, but he's a good sport, so I don't know if it'll give me too hard a time.
Is he coming to town to do something for Fine Home Building?
Yeah, we're going to do some job site visits and little podcasting maybe, so more on that to come. So Jeff's going to be horrified. He doesn't know anything about this.
More podcasts for you.
So this is a comment that I found on YouTube from Podcast 525. Hate to be this guy, but does a Bonfig wall solve the thermal bridging problem? Signed, this guy. So
that made me laugh.
That's just probably a question that merits its own conversation, or maybe its own after show or whatever. But yeah, that's the whole idea between the bond. That's the whole idea behind the Bonfig wall, is you put a little layer of foam in there between the drywall interior finish and the framing, and it's the thermal bridge.
It had been a long time since
it interrupts the thermal bridge.
I was looking back at the old article, that Stephen Bonfiglioli wrote that then spawned the name, or shortened version, when Rob and Justin and Brian were hosting the podcast, and it became the Bonfig Wall. Mm-hmm. And Stephen only wrote one article for Fine Home Building. And I counted, it's been mentioned in 29 different episodes of the Fine Home Building podcast, more than any other article.
That's fantastic.
Did you research that? Yeah.
And I'm going to guess, I've used his technique on a number of my projects, even before he published the article. It was something that a lot of, good ideas kind of pop up all over the place. Builders just kind of figure it out, remodelers. And I've used it over the years on roofs. I've used it on walls. I've used it in basements when we're finishing the walls for a finished basement. And I'm going to guess that his technique, after people have read that article, have probably been employed on thousands and thousands of projects all over the place. It's
That's
just,
so cool. So
the way that the genesis for fine home building articles that then people take and adapt to their own situations is I can only imagine. I've heard many stories, but I imagine there's many more we don't hear about.
yeah, he's got a legacy at this point. And
Yes.
for anybody interested, just to the title of the article is that Mike is referencing by Stephen Bonfiglioli is Breaking the Thermal Bridge. That's the title of it, which tells you exactly what this wall is about, right? And it's from
Briefly, it's a
2015.
2x6
15.
wall with an inch of polystyrene on the face of the stud, and then 1x3 furring put on top of that with ring shanked nails. And people will say, it must take forever to do. No one can do that. It's not a big deal, believe me. Right, Mike?
Right. It's not hard. Hey, Patrick, I'm wondering, do you remember the Nordic studs back from about 2006 through about 2009, 10? They were
I don't remember that, but
No?
I'm guessing it's some manufactured variant of the Bonfig wall.
You probably have heard of Nordic engineered wood products up in, I think they're in Ontario, Canada. And they came out with a stud which laminated I think it was a 2x4 with about an inch or inch and a half of foam with a piece of half-inch plywood on the face of that. And they sold them for a while. Then the Great Recession hit, and it just killed the building industry, and their product just vanished, and they haven't brought it back, and I'm surprised. Now we see other studs like T-stud that have come
right.
on the market to break that thermal bridge.
Have
But
you
it'd
worked with
be,
those, Mike? The T-studs?
I haven't. I've talked to Brian, the owner of the company, a number of times, and he has lots of great ancillary projects that are built on the T-stud idea that he's working on. But I haven't worked with him. I know a few people who have. Yeah.
Doug liked our discussion of tool storage. It was gratifying to see that I'm not the only one who keeps thinking, I need to get better organized. That thought can persist for years. I keep meaning to build a case of shallow drawers. I even have the half-inch Baltic birch plywood, but it hasn't happened yet. I appreciate the discussion of what to do with seldom used tools. There are tools you don't know when you will need or ever use again, but when you need it, you need it. A couple of months ago, a neighbor came to my door wondering if I had a basin wrench. After 30 minutes of searching, I found mine. When he returned it, he said I saved his life. If you're not a plumber, you may need a basin wrench once or twice in a decade, but when you need it, there is no substitute. I cannot agree more with that statement. Do you know what a basin wrench is, Kylie?
Basin wrench. I think I've seen one. I think I have seen one, but I can't describe it. Why do you
So
ask?
it's to tighten the supply lines to the bottom of a faucet, especially in a bathroom lavatory, because there's so little room to swing a wrench. So this is just a specialized wrench
Very
with
specialized, right?
long handle on it.
This put me in mind of it's not a tool, but I guess it's a tool. It's Brian referred to it as a wind hook, and it was one of those things that he had in his possession, and it's not something. It's for protecting, framing as it goes up from getting caught in the wind. I can't exactly explain it, but Brian had a mishap, and he said, "Oh, I had this wind hook, and I just forgot I had it because I never use it, but it would have saved me a whole bunch of hassle." So it's one of those types of things. This question put me in mind of it, or this comment.
What's a wind hook?
It's called. There's another term for it too. Mike,
It's
do you
like
know
a
what I'm
brace?
talking about?
Yeah.
It's
So when we tilt up walls, we build them flat on the floor deck, and you tilt them up. Of course, they're right at the edge of the platform of the floor below. So as you're lifting it up, if it's a windy day and the wind catches it, the wall just flies right off the house. And that's
which
what
is
happened
exactly
to
what
Brian.
happened. Yeah.
So wind hook it's either a device, usually it's a job site jig, which it anchors either with a rope or a cable the top of the wall down to the floor. So it limits how far it can go up. Then if you nail that bottom plate to the floor deck with some cleated over nails, it can't get caught by the wind. So that's a wind hook.
I learn new stuff on the podcast every time too. I think it's fantastic. This comes from Scott. Hello, I enjoy the podcast and just listened to episode 539. I live north of Cincinnati and have 2 concrete ready-mix plants within 10 miles. As of the fall of 2022, one will no longer sell to anyone without an account, but the other continues to support whoever calls in an order. The biggest surprise from the episode was the comment about a solar project taking 4 months of production from a concrete ready-mix facility. That is a lot of concrete. Does anyone account for the actual carbon footprint of building a solar plant? That's a good question, Scott. I don't know.
I tend to doubt it.
I tend to doubt it too, yeah.
Tend to doubt it, but only the most conscientious, I would gather.
And can you imagine how big the concrete piers or footings that are for the offshore wind turbines or even onshore wind turbines, right?
That blows my mind to even try to visualize. I'd love to see it, though. Imagine.
Oh, and then getting the concrete
How do they
out
get
there,
built?
all of
I mean,
it.
like, oh boy. That's wild stuff. I bet that's dangerous work, too.
Oh, I'm sure it is. Well,
carbon counting is, something that we're going to be discussing regularly on the Retrofit podcast. And it's definitely, we've got Lloyd Alter, who was formerly a prolific writer at Tree Hugger, has just joined GBA to become a regular contributor. And his whole column beat is carbon. And there's carbon measuring tools seemingly coming out left and right. Some are more targeted toward the residential sector, like the beam estimator, and others. I just found out about one last week. I saw it on LinkedIn. Software for more commercial. It was new to me. I hadn't heard of it. I can't remember the name of it, but I did run it by Mike Maines to see if he had heard of it or knew of anybody using it. And he said you have to be careful with these carbon counting software programs that are just kind of like hitting the scene right now. You have to really vet them.
It's like Chatbot,
yeah,
Chatbot GPT.
Yes, a little like that. Right. Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of people are of similar cognitive dissonance about concrete. It is a fantastic material for construction, highly durable, useful for so many things, but it is a problem, and I don't see a good solution. Maybe it's other kinds of cement that aren't so carbon emitting, but it's a hard nut to crack.
Yeah, it sure is.
We need more caliche.
I know, right? Well, it's too bad that things like rammed earth are so expensive and not practical. And there are alternatives, but they're just so, niche and not.
It's funny you say that, Mike, because in my Facebook feed just yesterday was a builder who found Adobe bricks in a bathroom remodel that he was working on, and cool. The house dated to the 80s, so it was actually someone's experimental building method, if you will. Not experimental, but probably an owner builder, right?
That's cool.
I asked him what the heck he was going to do to tile it because I'm guessing there's no TCA standards about Adobe bricks.
Nope.
Our first question comes from Evan. Hello, FHB podcast. I'm a mold assessment consultant in Dallas-Fort Worth, Climate Zone 3A, and I enjoy walking production builder job sites to learn where they're making building envelope mistakes so I can better track moisture intrusion in the future.
It's smart.
I found this mysterious fastener at one of the jobs, and I cannot find out what it is. I hope you all can help. It has a rotating ring at the top, and it appears to be some kind of lag bolt or wood screw. So let's first get to Evan's first question. He has another one coming up, but this is one of the coolest fasteners ever made. Mike, do you want to tell Evan and our podcast listeners what he found?
Well, How do you know I even know what it is?
I bet you know what it
Of
is
course
because
you
I
do.
think they
You're my
probably gave them
garden.
to you at JLC
I,
live shows.
so I generically call these jack screws, but they're also called jam adjuster screws, and they're used for primarily installing windows and installing door jams. And what it is, it's a screw which looks like an ordinary screw, but up just under the head, there's a little collar that's about maybe a quarter, half inch long that's threaded and spins independently. So the screw goes through this little collar and it's locked in there with some little keepers on the underside. So what happens is because they thread independently, and this little collar is threaded, is you would, let's take a door jamb for example, you drill a prescribed diameter pilot hole through the door jamb, then using a special dual drive bit, which will drive both the collar and the screw at the same time. You drive in the collar into the jamb, so the threads will lock into the jamb, and then it drives the screw in at the same time with that bit. Now, once it's secured, you can independently drive just the screw from the collar, which is now locked into the jamb. And as you turn the screw in, of course, the jamb will move in towards, say, the trimmer or the jack stud. And then as you back the screw out, it will actually push or pull because the collar won't move, it will pull that jamb out. So you can adjust the jamb in and out. So they're super useful. There's a couple companies that make them. There's a few different designs out there, but that's what they're used for.
And they
Mike, you're so
eliminate
good at
the,
describing things.
kind of dubious process of shimming. Shims fall out, they split. Sometimes there's a brick mold in the way, so you can't have them oppose easily. All these things, and this eliminates that. And I'm guessing it's also easier to foam around for air sealing than it would be, shims every 18 inches or 2 feet, right?
And the beauty I find with them is that unlike shims, where if you shim directly, say, behind a hinge of a door, now you're locked in. You can never move that door jamb in. However, if you're using the jack screw, say 5, 8 years from now, you can, if you have to dig the putty out that you filled the hole with, but you can drive that jack screw in a little bit more. We would typically position our jack screws under the door hinge location where the mortise is, and that way, of course, many people wouldn't know this, but we could pull that hinge off if we went back to adjust the doors on a house that we built and trimmed out. We could go back and move those. And I know Gary Katz has some alternative methods for shimming that wouldn't necessitate the jack screw, but it's just a way to make future adjustments possible.
The one brand I'm familiar with is GRK's Top Star, they call it. And if y'all are curious, you can go to their website and it gets a little demonstration of how it works. And they're super cool. I've used them. You don't have to fill it with putty though, Mike. They make little plastic covers to go in the recess, and it allows you to tweak it later.
Yeah, and if you don't want to see that, my painter, he likes everything smooth, like it's been, coated perfectly, and he'll pull the little plastic caps off and fill it with some wood putty, sand it out, and then paint it.
Have you seen these, Jeff? They're pretty cool.
I hadn't seen them until I looked at that clip on the GRK site. They are wicked cool.
Mike said
it makes it pretty
about
painless to install a door. It's fast.
I like the idea of thinking about future adjustments and repairs and whatnot. That seems like it would be a great article to have, tips for thinking about the future builder, just little things like
move,
that.
And sometimes they move seasonally every year. But you can't nail the casing tight, right? You got to leave the casing on the jamb
Give it some room.
So it can move around.
The first time I came across these was back in the early 80s when the vinyl replacement windows were just starting to hit the market after the old aluminum windows. And all of the vinyl windows would come with these jack screws already in the kit, because we would use those. You screw with replacement windows, they go inside the old window frame of the old double hung windows you find in New England. And these jack screws go in the side jamb, or the jamb of the old window, and you need to adjust it because they were pretty flimsy vinyl windows, and the jack screws help to maintain that adjustment at whatever they were, 8 or 10 inches apart.
Evan continues. I was listening to episode 489 about what y'all keep on hand in your shops, and while I keep many fasteners and lots of types of tape on hand, I found having shark bites in 1/2 inch, 3/4, and 1 inch are essential for winter weather, as friends, neighbors, and family will call me if there's a plumbing leak from a busted pipe. During the winter, these parts can be hard to find during freezes in our area. I also keep PEX and copper fittings of various sizes to make repairs should there be any such event in my 1996 townhouse. Yeah, of course, like I never thought about that. When the temperature is freezing, people buy these things all up, right?
Yep. And me owning a few rental houses, I do just as he mentions. I keep a little supply of all the different sizes and little pieces of pipe so I can patch in a frozen busted pipe or whatever. Yeah.
If you're going to do
handy.
plumbing work, you have to have plumbing parts. Like, you can't rely on going to the home center or the hardware store to get stuff. You need to have it. Doug was mentioning our discussion of keeping stuff on hand brought to mind, I rediscovered this yesterday, which is the Uline catalog, and I can't wait to buy some bins for my various stuff, and I might even, make them in a very colorful, beautiful design. So,
big Lego toys.
Oh man, this stuff is so cool, Kylie. I love this catalog.
Anything that organizes things is aces in my book. I love organization.
The other thing I discovered is that my favorite brand of brewed beverage, if you cut the top off the box, they fit perfectly on my 12-inch deep shelving. So there you go.
Now, how do you label them so you know what you've put in there?
Right. Duct tape.
Of course, any visitor thinks, oh my gosh, either he drinks a lot or he has a really good 2-year supply.
And you get on your library ladder and swing around with your boxes of Sierra Nevada.
Oh.
Yeah, the boxes are really too big. You need smaller bins for plumbing fittings and fasteners and stuff like that. It's just like, maybe that'd be good for safety gear or something larger, but it's not the right size.
Box in a box. Small boxes in a big box.
There you go. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Evan says, I'm feeding my burgeoning interest in building science with y'all's show, and I've enjoyed your pretty good house book immensely. Thank you for all you do and keep up the good work. Well, thanks, Evan, for writing in. And Evan has agreed to be on Pro Talk because I would love to talk to him about his work as a mold assessment consultant in Dallas.
That's a topic that comes up at GBA all the time. And honestly, we tried to organize a BS and Beer show around that topic, a couple of different times. And finding the right expert to talk about that is not easy. So good for you for smart to jump on that.
And when you do speak to Evan, a question to ask him that I'd be curious about is, since he's going around to all these production builders' job sites and learning the mistakes, if he's taking photographs, and then if he's ever considered sending the new home buyer, several months later, a note saying, oh, and by the way, these are the things that you're probably going to have to watch out for.
Oh, man.
And here's my card when you have a mold problem.
That's pretty sneaky.
Well,
maybe we can get a feature article in Fine Home Building of the things that Evan sees regularly on these builds, because I'm guessing it's nationwide, these things, what's happening that he's worried about.
Yeah. I'm sure
thanks for the kind words, Evan. Like I said earlier in the show, it's the amazing listeners that make it show what it is. This comes from Ben K. Greetings, FHB crew. My wife and I will soon be moving and renting a 1,500 square foot ranch-style house that was built in the 1960s. While the landlord is doing extensive renovation to the interior, after touring the house, there were some concerns that caught my eye. one of which is the lack of insulation between the unfinished basement and first floor. Since we will be paying for the utilities, I brought this to the landlord's attention. He agreed that if I'm willing to do the work of insulating, he'll pay for the material. Here are my thoughts on how to insulate, and I would appreciate some feedback. 1. Cut and cobble 2-inch rigid foam along the rim joist. 2. Spray foam any penetrations going from the basement to the first floor. 3. Staple insulation mesh to the joist and prep for blown-in cellulose. A couple of questions. Since it's an unfinished basement, do I need a vapor retarder between the bottom of the subfloor and the first floor, which are pine planks and not plywood, and the cellulose? If so, any thoughts on how to accomplish this? Do I need additional support for the cellulose, like strapping, or will the insulation mesh hold fine if stapled sufficiently? Something else to consider. The basement is dry, but there is efflorescence on the lower part of the basement walls, which, if I understand correctly, should be a sign of water intrusion. I plan on cleaning some of it off and seeing if it comes back to determine if there is still active water intrusion or the leftovers from something in the past. If it's still an issue, then I may need a dehumidifier if I add insulation and block drying potential, or maybe I should have a dehumidifier regardless. If I do need a vapor barrier, then I may swap the blown cellulose for faced fiberglass bats for ease of it. I can feel my arms itching already. The reason I wanted to stick with cellulose for the basement is because I'm sure the attic has little or no insulation as well, and I thought I could kill 2 birds with 1 insulation stone. Any input is appreciated. Thank you in advance. Ben K., Littleton, Mass. Okay, what do we think about this insulation between the basement, the unconditioned basement, and the conditioned house?
Well,
I can't help but
I
think that
would,
GBA readers would recommend conditioning the basement instead.
Bingo.
Do
Right,
the
especially if the
walls.
heating plant is down there. Why would we separate the heating plant from the warm part of the house?
And it's also
well,
sounds seemingly like a lot less work. You're not going to need to, in either location, you don't need to put in a vapor barrier, but the vapor barrier in the basement should be under the slab, period.
What do you say, Mike? You agree?
well, I'd back up a second and I'd ask the question, how long do you plan on being there?
There's that, yeah.
Because
Right. It's a
this
rental.
is a completely different metric than we usually discuss. Most of our questions come from homeowners
Right.
who are probably going to be there a while. And even if they're going to be there a short time, and then they'll be selling the house, the improvements that they make thermally can be explained to the buyers, so they understand that this house has been done well. You got to look at your time is valuable, even though the landlord would pay for the materials and you're going to put the labor in. If you're only going to be there for 3 or 4 years, and the energy cost over those 3 or 4 years are going to be, the savings, I should say, wouldn't, compensate you adequately for the time you put in doing all the work. On the other hand, if you're looking for a little more thermal comfort, then, that could be another metric. So evaluate whether it's worth it or not. But I agree with you, incorporating the basement. It also solves the problem that Ben's thinking about, which is air sealing between the basement and the first floor with those pine planks, and plus all the old holes, plus there might be a set of stairs going down there and a leaky ordinary hollow door at the top. All sorts of thermal air bypasses that would be almost impossible to track down and seal. So it's more practical to deal with it at the walls and the floor, and encapsulate, or incorporate the basement as living or as thermally protected space.
And Ben, if your landlord balks at buying rigid insulation to put on the foundation walls, which is where we're going to move our thermal boundary, instead of the floor, we're going to put it to the foundation. The above grade portion is the most important. It would be best if you could do all of it, but the above grade portion is way more, there's way more heat loss there than lower down. And air sealing is always a good idea.
Yep, without a doubt, air sealing, and then at the rim joist blockers where Ben, you mentioned, cutting, cobbling. Yep, that's an efficient way to do it.
You cut and cobble, and then you also
Yeah, then seal.
air seal. Yeah.
Yeah.
with spray foam typically,
One
right?
good reason to air seal the floor system is if you have naturally vented combustion appliances in your basement, an atmospherically vented water heater, an atmospherically vented boiler or a furnace. Stack effect can work against the convection that makes atmospherically vented appliances work. The rising air, flue gases, because they're warm, they rise out the flue. And if you have similarly warm air rising in the house, you're actually negating some of that natural buoyancy that warm air has coming off the heating appliance. So that's something to definitely keep in mind.
And then if you are air sealing the basement with what you just mentioned about an atmospheric combustion appliance in the basement, is if you're air sealing that basement, you're going to be robbing the appliances of the air. So you may have to put in some sort of separate duct which goes to or close to those combustion appliances, be it a water heater, a boiler, a furnace, or what have you.
Ben is in a state that's got very helpful programs for landlords and homeowners to improve the safety and efficiency of their homes. Mass Save.
Massachusetts, yeah.
I think that's the first thing I would do is contact them to see if there's help for improving the performance of this house.
Yeah. Massachusetts
That's a great
is
idea.
Yeah.
Plus the utility, and part of that they should, when they tap into Mass Save, it would also might trigger utility involvement. A lot of times utilities also have programs depending on what the heating source is, be it natural gas or electric. You can get some extra money from 2 buckets.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, I love hearing that.
Yeah.
Money from multiple buckets. Woo!
And it might be the case where the landlord, the property owner, would have to make the initial contact with those organizations, but you can do all the research, so you make it easy for the landlord to make the call, or you can make the call and just say, "Oh, my name is," and then just initiate it that way. But sometimes they are limited to the property owner. Other times it's available to the tenants as well.
I can't see a reason why your landlord wouldn't be all on board for improving the efficiency of this house and making it more, marketable and leaving money for rent instead of paying utilities. All these things are good for landlords, right?
Right. Yeah.
And with a conditioned basement like that, I mean, it's only a short increase in the amount of work to actually finishing the basement, right?
More
So
space,
now you've initially rented what was the size of the house, 1,500 square feet. Now you just added another 600-700 square feet of usable space in the basement, perhaps.
That's a good way to sell it to the landlord too, if he's lukewarm about the idea.
Especially if you're going to perform the labor.
Yeah, right. I was just thinking, because I live above a garage, that another case scenario where his original thinking would apply and work well would be with a conditioned space above an unconditioned garage. You're not going to typically you're not going to insulate your garage. Why would you do that?
No,
right?
And you need a very good air separation between the garage and the house for, exhaust fumes.
Yeah. Same idea, sort of.
And a last thought, Ben did mention, he's thinking cellulose, and that's why he was going to net the bottom of the floor joist, because he was thinking of blowing in the attic. He didn't mention air sealing that attic floor or the ceiling of the ranch style house. So that if there's no insulation up now, that's low hanging fruit, is to do an air sealing operation up there. And there are a number of articles, both in Fine Homebuilding and in GBA, on all the typical places where you're going to need to seal up in an attic before
and that's
the insulation.
Best money spent, because you're defeating that stack effect that's going to make that heated air go up into the attic and out of your house. This is already a good show.
I wish all my tenants were as conscientious as Ben, as far as that goes.
I want to hear what
free
he ends up
labor.
doing. Yeah,
The
right.
thing is, Ben, is a renter, and he might be just itching to work on a house.
True.
So that might
Yeah.
explain part of this
Yes.
ambition, right?
Brian struggled with that a bit when he was a renter because he loves working on houses. And
Oh, I did too. I was like
Yeah.
fixing the landlord's downspouts and dishwasher. Yeah, I was like doing all kinds of stupid stuff.
It's not an unreasonable thing to think that, Ben, you could even ask your landlord to pay you something for your time. I
Yeah,
often
I
offer
agree.
to my tenants, if you want to do some work on the property, I will not only pay the materials, I'll actually compensate you and coach you along the way. Because to me, as a property owner, if I can get somebody who's willing to do some work, and maybe we'll make an arrangement on the rent or some way that I can compensate them for some of the work they do, because that is a lot of work, and I, as a landlord, end up with a big benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you get a very invested tenant. Literally, you have someone who wants to enjoy the fruits of their labor, right? They want to live in their improved home.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I think he should get paid. The materials doesn't feel like enough. Covering the cost of the materials doesn't feel like enough for the project that he was laying out, that he was willing to do, which was pretty involved. This one, I mean, I think insulating will be a little easier for him. Still, I agree, Mike. Should be paid.
Ben, get Mass Save involved. Let them help. Oh my gosh. So we heard from Mario. He is the first participant in questions from Ask the Crew, which I think we debuted in episode 541. Does anyone remember?
I don't remember it.
Mario writes, questions from the crew. I'll bite. So what's a great day on the job for you? He answers, working outside when the weather's cooperating with a fun crew, even on nice cold winter's day, being a productive day when you're all in a good mood and having a laugh. Not too many days do I wish I were inside, even in the hugely variable Newfoundland climate. And the view doesn't hurt. See pics below. Did you guys see this beautiful place?
I didn't.
Where Mario lives?
I did.
Yeah.
Now I remember. Yes, gorgeous. Unbelievable.
There's got to be some just absolutely horrible days working outside in Newfoundland. Oh my gosh.
Right, yeah. Sounds delightful to me.
We asked, would you buy a house that needs a well / has a big flaw? Yes, if the price reflects the work required. We bought a real dump 5 years ago because it was centrally located and really cheap. Have been fixing it up ever since. Would I do it again? Maybe not. I was unprepared for how difficult it is to do work on your own house after work motivation / materials cost / moving stuff out of the way and living in a reno zone. But I shouldn't ever be worried about making the small mortgage payments. Yeah, it's really hard to work on your own house when you do it every day. Right, Mike?
Right.
Oh, yeah. And living in a place that you're working on is way harder than, leaving a construction site and coming back the next day. Are interest rates / the economic outlook affecting your home projects? Yes, somewhat. The rising interest rates are serving their intended purpose. Borrowing money against the property to renovate it is less appealing as the rates go up, not knowing how hard it will be to pay it back. What's the most interesting project you've ever worked on? Retrofitting a steel hull ship into a tall ship. Not much carpentry work, but I was young and did a huge variety of labor tasks. I spent the winter in a Hamilton shipyard, not ideal. Then the summer sailing it around the Great Lakes and out to the Atlantic. Amazing. We worked hard, had a diverse and fun crew that made it a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I really enjoy what you guys put out each week. Keep up the good work. It's nice to keep advancing the thinking about how we do what we do. Mario. Well, thank you, Mario. Boy, that's super fun, right?
Yeah.
I think I decided what I want to do to my dotage. I think I want to sail around in a tall ship, on the Great Lakes.
That sounds wonderful.
I'm betting it's way harder than I think it is.
Salem, Massachusetts has a beautiful tall ship on display in the harbor at all times. They're wonderful to look at.
So what's a great day on the job site for you, Mike?
Oh, boy. Putting me on the spot here. What's a great day? A lot of what Mario mentioned about working outside, no matter what the weather is, and working with a crew of guys that you just laugh and have fun. And I remember some of my fondest memories were of the 80s and 90s with the different crazy crew people that we'd hire on. And, they might last a week or a year. But even to this day, Rick Arnold and I, if we get together, or a couple of other friends that are still in our little circle, if we mention, like Andrew Baby, everybody knew this guy, and the time well, I won't go into the stories, but that's the way it goes, right? Not only was it fun then, it's fun reminiscing about it.
I would agree. Being outside working with fun people is as good as it gets, especially if you're doing fun work that you're making progress on. Yeah,
I can appreciate that. I had some fun outside too.
Yeah. What about you, Kylie? What was
I can think of my favorite. I can think of my favorite day on the job. I was the rose gardener, and I was just toiling away doing my thing, and my coworker Brad came out. He's a 6'5" or 6", very large man, and he came out in a tiny little sundress that he had found in the laundry room, and his big old work boots, and he put on his Velcro, his tool belt, and he just sauntered around the public rose garden. I have never laughed. I thought I was going to throw up a lung. I have never laughed so hard in my life, but just goofy times, Oh, that was such fun. Yeah, working with good people, good, smart people, passionate about what they're doing, and have a great sense of humor, and outside with the fresh air. I still miss it. I've been away from it for a long time. I still miss it.
I would say the same about Habitat. That was the joy of Habitat, is people who were motivated for the right reasons to build houses for people who need it, and hanging out with them was always fun. And they were very different kinds of people, which was also amazing.
Yep.
Boy, so let's talk about mall redevelopment. Can I guess you all are big mall goers? Yeah, right?
Is that what I say about myself? I don't think so.
Mike, did you, as a teen, 20-something, go to the mall like many of us did back in the day?
Back in the day.
I did not. However, there were a couple of big malls not far from where we lived, and I remember participating in junior achievement back in high school, and it was one of the things with junior achievement is you have to build and make something, at least at the time. So our marketing strategy was to set up a little tabletop in a mall. So that was my mall experience for a couple of like a month, is in the evening going there and trying to sell these things that we made.
How were sales?
Well, you're sparking a little memory for me. What we made was, it was, the old, the glass things that you put around a candle. They're shaped like globe, I guess.
A hurricane.
Yeah, I think that's what
hurricane thing. Yeah, hurricane glass. So what our thing was is we made we took maybe a 5x5, couple pieces of wood. One we bored out to set the bottom in, put a candle in, put the globe around it, and then we had a top and it had a rope. Those sales were marginal until one night the power went out in the mall, and we were the hottest thing in the mall. We could not have planned it.
Neat.
So we lit them all up and we're carrying them around. Good thing the fire department wasn't around, because I'm sure there's something against having lit candles. And all of a sudden we were mobbed by people. We sold out everything we had because people saw that, oh my gosh, if the power goes out in my house, I could have this little candle gadget for $5.
And also, being in a darkened mall sounds creepy.
Well, the emergency lights came on, so it gave enough to get your way to the exit, but it wasn't much illumination, more than a couple of feet around each light. But we were walking around with these things and having fun as 15-year-olds.
Kylie, Jeff, did you guys go to the mall?
I was forced to go to the mall. I hated every single second of it and made it very clear. My mother used to drag me to the mall.
I used to work in a mall.
What did you do at the mall, Jeff?
I worked at a department store, and then later on, when I was working in television, We used to every year have the telethon, muscular dystrophy telethon, which would be set up in the courtyard in the mall, which is a nightmare.
What a throwback! Oh my gosh! Live
Some malls are done very
fundraising was
well,
a thing.
Yeah,
right.
and there is nothing in the world louder than when the monster truck Bigfoot drove into the mall.
God, that sounds awful.
For these and so many other reasons, I am not a fan of the mall.
I will say, Seattle. Speaking of Seattle, I will say, I'm with you, Patrick. I'm not either. I think the interior environment of a mall is just so not conducive to human health. And there's so many. They're problematic in design, as are so many things. But they can be done well. There's a. It's called University Place, I think. It's an outdoor mall. So all the stores face outward. And it's a pedestrian experience that is so well orchestrated and thought about. And it's actually a lovely place to be. There's outdoor seating. It's planted. I mean, it's a lot of money went into it, of course. But I don't even think of that as a mall, although it is a mall. But it's a whole different experience than going inward.
We're going to talk more about that in the podcast after show about some innovative ways to combine residential development and commercial space. And what I find most interesting is the models that are trying to recreate what we had 100 years ago in virtually every downtown in every small, medium-sized, and large city in America, which is kind of interesting. Here's a typical scenario. Kimco bought the shopping center in 2002 for $80 million and has since navigated the storms that had befallen brick-and-mortar retail. 4 years after the acquisition, a Home Depot was built on the site of a former JCPenney, seeking to give Westlake Mall a town square vibe. Westlake, New Jersey, a town square vibe. Kimco built a main street through the center of it and added more dining options. It sounds a lot like what you were describing, right, Kylie?
Yeah, somewhat, yeah.
20 years later, the Home Depot is still there, as well as a Safeway, a Target, a Ross, and a number of small businesses. The property is also near a stop for BART. Oh, it must be Bay Area. The public transportation system in the Bay Area. Carla Okfamia, who owns Paw Patch Pastries, took note of these details when she was considering moving her dog-friendly bakery to Westlake from San Francisco, where it had been for 13 years. Before signing her lease, she spent the day sitting in the shopping center and people-watching. The residential feeling, even before the apartments had been constructed, was a selling point for her. It's a lot more convenient for people, she says. If they can walk there, then it's simple. Winning over retailers is still a top priority for developers that want to add residences. So oftentimes, I'm guessing the retailers I guess they'd rather have an empty mall than residences. I don't understand that.
Well, you find so many strange things in malls these days, too. It's like the DMV suddenly is located in the mall, or the dentist is in the mall, your dermatologist. It's like, I think, there's something to be said for wanting to use vacant space like that, right?
This is going to pique everyone's interest before we get to the after show. So hopefully y'all tune in. If you're not Fine Home Building All Access members, maybe this will be the enticement you need. This article that was in the Times goes on to say, adding residences isn't the only solution that mall owners are considering. At Morristown Mall in New Jersey, a local medical center, Cooper University Healthcare, will take over the space once occupied by Sears and build a clinic for outpatient services. The addition of a medical services within a shopping center is a popular trend as well, said Mr. Latello of Cushman. It's becoming of such interest to real estate executives in retail that he now includes the concept in his presentations at conferences in a slide that reads, "The Mall of the Future, Dinner, a Movie, and a Colonoscopy."
Oh, boy.
Oh, man.
Sounds like a date night.
I think you need the colonoscopy before dinner, though, don't you?
Well, that's your reward, right?
Oh, boy.
The shortage of housing combined with the infill potential of these sites are the reason of why they definitely make a lot of sense, says Jay Libick, National Director of Multifamily Analytics at CoStar, a commercial real estate data company. I have not heard really a lot of pushback on these developments compared with other multifamily developments that do have problems moving forward due to regulatory or citizen pushback. Well, that's because they were huge developments in the first place, right? It's not like you're bringing intensive development to what was single-family homes, for example, right? What do you guys think? Mall of the future?
I'm in
Urgent care? Yeah.
I'm in favor
Dental
of using
care?
existing structure.
It's like you mentioned earlier, it's like recreating the old village center where you've got a village where you got residences nearby within walking distance. You've got your medical, you've got your shopping for groceries, you've got your shopping for, home, home goods and other services, dental, whatever, all in the same vicinity. So,
Diversity is the solution to everything. Yeah, you've got to. That's why
it makes it a better
malls
place
fail.
to live. I think most people would agree. Isn't it nice to be able to go get a pastry, like walking down the block? That's pretty cool.
Well, it's also nice to be able to walk down the block and do everything that you need to do. Get it all done in a very short radius. I had that situation when I lived in Seattle, and it was so nice. I never had to go anywhere.
Is all this being framed as a mechanism for increasing the housing in the U.S., or is this just a concept for?
Well, the cynical side of me said it's a way to keep malls viable and commercial developers wealthy. So, I mean, but I think it's a reasonable solution to our shortage of housing. Maybe, I don't know. Will people be able to afford it? That's a question I have. And more.
And how will they be done? How will they be done?
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Mike, Kylie, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your questions and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Happy building. Stay tuned for mall redevelopment.
Mall redevelopment.